Good morning, everyone. If everyone would sort of take a seat, we'll get started this morning. I know everyone's time is valuable, and we'll try to get started timely and good. Hello. Hi. Good morning.
Yeah, water would be great. I recognize you. Thank you.
Well, oh, that's okay. Pretty good.
Looks like it's yeah.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Like to welcome everyone out to our legislative breakfast meeting this morning with KEDC. We also would like to welcome our Lieutenant Governor, Ms. Jacqueline Coleman, this morning, and glad to have her with us along with all of our legislative representatives this morning. It's always good for us to be able, as educators, to be able to speak with our legislative representatives, and we appreciate you all taking time to come out and talk to us about some of the concerns that we have with education and to have those discussions with us. So thank you for being here and allowing us to speak with you this morning. I'm going to turn it over to a man that needs probably very little introduction. We are fortunate today to have Bill Bryant as our moderator. Bill has been with Channel 27 News for 39 years, and what a career. And he also is host of the Kentucky Newsmakers and Kentucky KET Comment on Kentucky. So we are very fortunate to have him with us today to conduct our legislative session. So this time I'll turn it over to Bill Bryant.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me and getting me up at a time that I don't see that often anymore. Back in the day, for the 16 years, I was doing the morning news, so I was up at 3 a.m. Now I'm there until midnight, and so it's get up more 9:30 or 10 and get going, work like 2 to 10. So people are always a little bit curious about how we do that. It's interesting when you drop an observer into the middle of the crowd who knows all of the issues and what you're dealing with and all of that. And I kind of watch from afar and report on the issues. So hopefully that'll give you a little bit of a different perspective. Honored to be here for a KEDC, which is the oldest and largest educational co-op in the state, as I understand, with 75 districts, and most of those right in the WKYT viewing area. So we do appreciate that. And a couple of superintendents said that we'd been helpful to them in the mornings, making decisions about what to go, whether to go or not. And so I'll tell Chris Bailey and Jim Caldwell about your appreciation for their weather forecasts as well. We'll have an interesting discussion today. There are lots of heavy issues. The legislature is going to come to town. They'll have a lot on their plate as always. We don't know how long they will be there. This is the short session coming up. And what the priorities they need to know, and obviously you have your questions. So we will begin with that, and we'll get to just a quick update from the Lieutenant Governor, who Jacqueline Coleman, also an educator before she became Lieutenant Governor of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And so we will at this time hear from the Lieutenant Governor who got here.
I
You
got
wanna-
here.
You want to do it
Yes.
from there?
I
That's
can just do
fine.
it from right here. That's
Absolutely.
fine. Yes. Well, good morning. It's great to be with you all again. Thank you so much for having us, and to all of the legislators that are here today. Thank you for showing up. I think it's really important that we have these conversations between the people who lead our school districts in our communities and the people who lead the Commonwealth. So let me begin by saying that Governor Beshear and I are proud to be an education first administration. Always have been, always will be. That is the platform on which we ran. That is why it's so important to have a teacher in the Lieutenant Governor's office. And that has been really the majority of my job in this role is to advise on education issues for everything from pre-K through higher education. Certainly, having spent my career in the classroom and on the basketball court, maybe even coaching against some of you, I have a very much a fondness for K-12. It's where my heart is. It's where I spent my life. And so thank you all for what you do, because I certainly know that is not easy. But just a quick update on where we are. I know we've been through, since 2019, when we came into office, we've been through more challenges than certainly we could have ever imagined together. And I won't belabor the pandemic too much, but one thing that I'm very proud of with this administration is the economic development that Governor Beshear has led through this Commonwealth. We have had over $21 billion worth of investments made in the private sector in Kentucky that's going to help us to create over 40,000 jobs across the Commonwealth. And what's important to me as a girl from Bergen, a town with 1,000 people and a four-way stop, is that these opportunities are coming to every zip code in Kentucky. Certainly the largest economic development announcement we've ever had is the Ford and SK Oval electric vehicle battery plants in Glendale. Glendale's the town with, I think, maybe 2 stoplights and a restaurant. and it's just had the largest investment that Kentucky's ever seen and that Ford has ever made, which I think is really important when we talk about rural economic development, making sure that those jobs and those opportunities come to every corner of the Commonwealth. And so it's really important to remember, though, that while those jobs numbers and those investments are the things that get the headlines, the reality is that's the end game. We so often talk about those types of economic development issues as a today solution. The solution today is to recognize and move forward as if the future of Kentucky's Commonwealth is in our classrooms, because that's where it is. And so, as an example, it's very possible that the first wave of employees that will walk into the Ford SK Oval electric vehicle battery plant, they could be sophomores in high school today, right? And so when you think about innovation and ingenuity and, preparing our kids for an economy that we don't even know exists yet, is something that you all are challenged with every single day. And so I always say that there's 3 things that we have to do. 1, we have to make sure that our policies put kids first. Number 2, we have to make sure that our policies support the people who support our kids every day. Yours and your teachers' working conditions are our students' learning conditions. And last but not least, we have to make sure that our schools have the resources to do what we have asked them to do. In the words of my pawpaw, you cannot win the Kentucky Derby with a pack mule. And so if we are going to ask certain things of you as school districts, then we need to make sure that you have the resources to actually accomplish those goals. And so those are the 3 things that drive Governor Beshear and myself as we're trying to think about how to move Kentucky forward. And the last thing I'll say is, as we, on the heels of these test score releases, there's always chatter around it. It's one of those things where you're never as good as you want to be, and you can always be better. And so it's a really hard day for schools to be in those situations. So, when those scores are released every year, it's a lot of chatter, a lot of finger pointing, a lot of blaming. And we have, in my mind, we have three choices. One, we can accept this as the new normal and settle. We can point fingers and armchair quarterback. And I don't know, I know you all know this. There's a lot of armchair quarterbacks out there. Or third, we can roll up our sleeves and get to work. And the governor and I chose to roll up our sleeves and get to work. And we chose to release our Education First agenda. Some of it you've seen before, and some of it is a little bit more parsed out. But this was just a couple weeks ago. It includes things like teacher and school staff raises. The governor's put that in the budget every single year that we've been in office, and it has not made it through yet. So it's my hope that with the largest surplus that Kentucky's ever had right now and the lowest unemployment rate, that's a commitment that we can come together and make to make sure that we are recruiting and retaining the best teachers for our kids. Next is funding universal pre-K. It's not going to happen tomorrow and it's not going to happen overnight, but we've got to start putting one foot in front of the other, because your kindergarten readiness rates are very similar to your transition rates for your high school seniors. So when the kids walk in behind the 8 ball, they're very likely to stay behind the 8 ball. Y'all know that. And so being able to institute universal pre-K is really important. Making sure we invest in textbooks, technology, and professional development. Our teachers can't get better and they can't stay on the cutting edge of innovation and all of the things that we have if they don't have professional development funding to do that. We've proposed a loan forgiveness program for teachers to help, again, recruit and retain more teachers. We have proposed support for mental health. And many of you know that in my office, we launched the Student Mental Health Initiative over the last couple years, and it was student-led. They developed the questions, they developed the action summits, and they dove into the data and develop policy recommendations based on what they heard from their peers across the state. We went on a little bit of a roadshow and presented that to all of the agencies, public and private partnerships, and to some of these folks who are up here today at the Interim Joint Committee on Education. And last but not least, one of the best tools we had to retain teachers and make sure that once we got good people into the classroom, they stayed there, is restoring pension systems. That's something that has been, I think, a huge hit to our schools in terms of helping teachers to be financially inclined, I guess, to stay in the classroom for that investment in their pension. And so that's the Education First agenda that we released just a couple of weeks ago. And as you all know, we always talk about being on Team Kentucky. And as someone who spent her life in the classroom teaching government, I've never felt that education can or should be a political issue. And so I'm really hopeful that in this session and beyond, we can all come together and do what we know we need to do to help our schools move forward. None of it is possible to do everything overnight. But I do believe that the folks that are here today with us they are invested and interested in education. They serve in the capacity of most of them on the education committees. And so I believe that we can find some common ground and help to move forward, because like I said, the future of our Commonwealth is in your classrooms today. And so that's how we should make policy, and that's how we should govern. Thanks, Bill.
Lieutenant Governor, thank you very much. And as we move along here very shortly, the superintendents will have their own questions, and we'll do that. But let me talk about a couple of priority questions that were brought up. And just start with that. Earlier this week at the Kentucky Chamber Legislative Preview event, some House and Senate leaders predicted that they may not open the budget during the upcoming session. And if they did, it may only be for a very few select items. Do you predict that you may appropriate some additional funding to districts for school safety and security investments? As we know, most schools still do not have SROs. Senator Wise, you want to begin there?
Happy to. Thank you, Bill. Thank you all for the attendance and for the invitation to be here this morning. I cannot speak in terms of Senate leadership or House leadership about opening up the budget, but I will say I've been on record since passing Senate Bill 1, and Representative Wildner's over there and others that have helped along the way with the mental health focus of that bill, as well as the security focus of that bill. The last thing we want to do is put on forth districts any type of unfunded mandate when it gets into SROs. I know many of you all have worked tirelessly in your school districts of getting SROs there, but at the same thing about trying to hire more school psychologists, more school guidance counselors. We need those professionals inside the classroom walls now more than ever, especially after COVID. I personally hope, especially after Uvalde, I think comments were even made by the speaker and by the Senate president that this would be something we would look to fund because, to be very blunt, it's a great bill, but if it doesn't have funding attached to it, it's not as effective as we wanted that bill to be. I was very proud, and all of my colleagues here, who everybody on this panel voted for that bill if they were in the legislature at that time. We want to keep our kids safe. We want our teachers safe. We want everyone safe. And that's not just from a threat from outside, but it's also just, from any situation of just school safety environment. So it is my hope, and I would make sure to be in the ear of our Senate leadership if we do open up the budget, that we make sure that we are invested with school safety.
Any other thoughts on that question on school safety? All right. Chronic absenteeism was a well-acknowledged problem in many districts before the pandemic. It is apparently a much bigger problem now. We were observing that by hearing the attendance rates in the news, but now talking to some of the superintendents to hear what an issue that is. And of course, as we know, under the formula, it is tied to the funding. So many folks do not prioritize getting their children to school every day. Would you support providing additional tools, maybe strengthening a process, laws for the directors of pupil personnel to get truant children to school? Who wants to pick up on that? Senator,
I still practice law in that area, and I'm in the courtroom of Eastern Kentucky. I was in Hazard yesterday, but throughout, I think the challenge is the pandemic has been referred to, whether it's the test scores or absenteeism. We're not alone. This is a national fallout from this, and I think it might be premature to try to change anything in that regard. I think our laws, we've got laws. I think they're strong enough. I think they're available tools. I communicate regularly with our personnel folks, and there are challenges. And the shutdown of the court system, as many of you can attest to, through the pandemic, only exacerbated that problem. I'd like to wait a year and see where we are, and maybe look how we can enforce what we have better.
others? Yes, Senator.
I would also say, right now, speaking recently in front of a group of superintendents and also just school administrators, we need to revisit Senate Bill 200. I was not in the legislature when Senate Bill 200 came through, so I did not vote on that bill. But I will tell you, from talking to you all and others within the school walls, we have to revisit and look at that bill and to see where are we now as it relates to issues involving juvenile justice. I'm very confident that the bill sponsor of that, I've had conversations with him, and he's had conversations, I think, with others that may be in this room, that he is open to looking and revisiting the bill of what was put forth then, because this is a problem. The attendance issue, you are seeing it right now of the questions of, do we do a ADA compared to ADM? Is that the time to do this right now? But at the same time, it's been hard enough to get kids in a normal routine, but at the same time, some kids just aren't coming to school. And I'm hearing that from so many. I'm seeing kids sometimes, during the school hours when they're not out for school, they're on the streets, they're out and about. And so something's going on there. We've got to get these kids back within the school wall. So I'm glad to hear we're talking about Senate Bill 200.
Now, let me do Representative Lockett and then Senator Thomas.
Yes.
You're good. Yeah.
Okay, good. I think our discussion of that, there we go.
Now you're right.
Can you hear me now? Wow. Okay. I think our discussion around this issue really revolves around two things. First of all, Senate Bill 200, I think, is a huge issue One of the things that I've looked at and talked about and discussed are within that Senate bill in terms of how do we deal with truancy, how do we deal with absences, and how do we enforce those? I've actually had that conversation with one of my superintendents, Mr. Matt Moore, who I will take a second and say that I think he is one of the best in the state. He is works hard for our district. But I also think a key component to all of this and a lot of the issues I think that we will talk about today is parental involvement. When we talk about kids not coming to school and kids being out on the street and so forth, we have to come up with solutions in terms of how the school district works in conjunction with parents. How do we empower parents? How do we get them involved in the school system? That's got to be part of that equation.
All right, Senator Thomas.
I tend to have a loud, okay, that's good. I tend to have a very loud voice. I want to go back to something Senator Wise said, because I want to be on record today as saying I completely agree with him that we need to open Senate Bill 200. I want all of you to know that just this Monday night, I met with 14 social workers across the state who are really concerned with the way things are proceeding in the area of juvenile justice and some of the dangers that exist there. Politically, my colleagues know that I am not one of these "we got to lock them up" persons. I don't subscribe to that attitude. However, I think we have to have some kind of balance here when we talk about issues like my colleague Senator Webb talked about absenteeism, like Representative Lockett talked about by parental consent. Representative Tipton has heard me mention several times that we have to make parents accountable. You know, I've said on the Senate floor many times, I'm a former PTA president. So I've been a PTA president. I was a PTA president for Bryan Station High School for 4 years. That's how long I was. So I'm very focused and understand the importance of parents in the lives of their children. Now, I'm sure Senator Webb will be the first to tell me we don't always have parents there, that a lot of children being raised by their grandparents. In fact, in Kentucky, I'm sure the Lieutenant Governor will say now we have too many children being raised by their grandparents, but we got to deal with this problem. So I want you to know, Senator Wise, I agree with you. We've got to reopen Senate Bill 200. We've got to make some changes there, because you know that is a real problem for our social workers here in the state. That's a real problem for Kentucky.
All right, Representative Tipton wants to weigh in.
Thank you, Bill. And I think this is an important conversation that we need to have, but we should not forget that right now there are superintendents in this room. There are superintendents across the Commonwealth of Kentucky trying to figure out how they're going to balance their budget in the 23-24 school year. And I've heard from many of them. The issue is with absenteeism down. The last few years, due to the pandemic, we have put provisions in to allow districts to use their 2018, 2019, 2019, 2020 data. That's going off this year. So now we've got districts who are faced with a critical situations. And I was at CKEC yesterday and we talked about this subject. Senator Wise and I co-chaired the school funding task force in the 21 interim. And one of the things that was mentioned was whether or not we need to consider going from adjusting the SEEK formula from an ADA to an average daily membership, because I understand it costs just as much to provide the services for the children who are enrolled, who are members of that school, whether they're there or they're not. And maybe even it costs more when they're not, because there are more wraparound services. I filed a bill late in session to get the topic out there last year. And I'll ask the same question to this group. You can answer now or maybe later. What are the feelings of the group in this, the superintendents in this group, about looking at changing the SEEK formula from an average daily attendance model to an average daily membership model?
Thankfully, I got served on that task force with you and appreciate your work on that. One of the things I would ask everyone to think about, though, is every single model that was given to us about going to ADM adjusted. In other words, you wouldn't get the 4,100 per student. So if a school district had very high attendance, they would lose by going to ADM. If they had very low attendance, they would benefit by going to ADM. So what it boils down to is still going to take more money. If you have the same pot of money and you go to ADM, then that per student allotment was changed. So it'd be adjusted to less than $4,000 because you have the same amount in the budget. Personally, I would love to go to ADM because my teachers, my staff, they're going to work very diligently to get people in the classroom. It's much more difficult to have class without them than it is to have it with them. But if we go to ADM without adding more money to the budget, then it's really a push. There's going to be winners and losers across this area. So if you have really high attendance and you go to ADM, you're probably going to lose money. I know that sounds odd, but there will be an adjustment per student amount. If you have really low attendance, then you're probably going to win. So, and I hate to talk about seek winners and seek losers, but if there's not more money added to the budget, then to me, ADA versus ADM is a moot point.
Would you say it potentially incentivizes lower attendance? Is that what you're
No,
saying?
sir. I'm not incentivizing lower attendance at all. What I'm saying is that we have a lot of districts that have low attendance that will put at a large amount of staff time in trying to get students to school. So again, with that thought, my point there is, again, keep in mind, unless you add money to the budget, ADA versus ADM is really a moot point.
The further responses. Okay, we'll go ahead to the floor with the comments and questions from the superintendents and administrators, and of course, Dr. Jim Flynn and Eric Kennedy are helping with the mic out there. Go ahead.
As context, Mr. Fletcher's degrees in physics and mathematics, so he understands numbers. Okay, so context, I think, matters sometimes. I would propose an idea that I've had is the debate of 18-19 versus 23-24 data. If we're going to look at something, potentially look at districts like myself, which are facing not only an enrollment decline, but also going from 94-95% attendance typically to 89-90. So I'm getting whammied by enrollment and percentage. So it's a twofer for my district. I would propose that we look at maybe taking the 18-19 data, reducing it by 1%, your whatever that was, take 1% less, or you allow them to use their data from this year. So Raceland Independent, who has an enrollment increase, is not penalized by us staying on 18-19 data. He's fortunate. He has more children coming to his school district, so he should not be penalized because others are decreasing. So I would say look at coming down 1% off of your ADA or some number and gradually working downward so that we don't have to completely reduce all the interventions and all the things, all the services that we're providing with guidance counselors, social workers, the things that we've tried to put in place so that we don't just have to say, okay, to make budget, we've got to take all this away, because the needs of our students and staff are greater than ever. They're greater than ever. And it's no one's fault, no one individual thing, no one individual person. That's just a fact. Our kids, for whatever reason, have more needs than they've ever had.
Yes.
Just as a follow-up, I guess not on again. As a follow-up to your statement, sir, can you go into a little more detail when you say that the kids and staff currently have more needs than ever? Is that due to the pandemic? Is it something before? Can you please kind of elaborate on that?
Sure. I think the answer is yes. It's pandemic. It's our society. It's the fact that I didn't catch I believe it's Senator on the end's name mentioned grandparents raising their children. It's all of those things. It's all of those things. You know, when someone comes into my school and they've not had breakfast or they've not got personal hygiene taken care of, where do you think that their mindset is? Is it on learning, or is it on, and I didn't have shampoo, I didn't have soap, you know, do I smell? I'm sitting here next to my friend, you know. Those needs are greater than I've ever seen in my school district. The whole mental health of kids being withdrawn and not having the social interaction. You know, we've got, you know, third graders that had a couple years where we were online, and they didn't develop those interaction skills, and we're still struggling to catch those up. We had the need, those mental health, those family services, that we provide through youth service centers, through those type of things, guidance counselors, we've made a push to try to add those. The school resource officer, all the things you guys are mentioning, you're all, yes, on just about everything you've said. I haven't heard anything that I would say, no, we don't need to do that. Yes, I agree with everything that everyone up there has said. It's just figuring out how we get to that point.
That's part of my district. And everything Jamie says is true. And even though Kentucky might have a low unemployment rate, not so much in my district. We've had an exodus of major industries, of healthcare facilities in the Raceland district, let's say, impacted even though they picked up some kids. We've lost property tax value. We've had massive exodus in the steel, incidental coal industry, as Pike and others have, as well as healthcare providers leaving. And with that, you lose your pool of mental health professionals. Believe me, we don't have dentists, whatever the case is. We've got challenges, especially, historically, Lewis County dentist. A kid's got a toothache, he's not going to learn. Transportation, the list just goes on and on of things that impact us. I was in Jackson and Hazard yesterday. We've got natural disasters on both ends of the state. People living in campers at the high school with no end in sight, places in Letcher County that's not probably coming back. We've got to fund this stuff, people. We're sitting here talking about it. We've got to identify the needs, and it's not going to be a one size fits all for these districts. And whatever accommodation we need to make to get us through this hard time is what we've got to do. And I'm committed to try to do it.
I'd like to circle back to Representative Tipton. First of all, sir, I have the utmost respect for you, and gentlemen, Senator Wise, so many of you on that panel I've worked with on different things. So to answer your question, Representative Tipton, I think whichever model we go with, and to kind of echo what Mr. Weddington's saying, is we try to do something that's hold harmless. If we move to a certain area, let's not let funding fall below where it is currently for districts. If it increases because of attendance, if it increases because of ADM, great. But let's try to do something where it's a hold harmless type situation. So to answer your question, Representative Tipton, I think that ADM would be great. ADA would be great, as long as we go into a hold harmless type situation, either one.
Dr. Fletcher, I agree with you. And we're not going to have the capacity in a short session in 2023 to deal with this issue. But I brought that question up because the points you all have brought up, there is an immediate need, an immediate concern. And I think maybe we will have the capacity to look at what we can do during the 23 session to address this issue as the districts are looking at your 23-24 budgets. And then hopefully as we go into 24, we'll have time over the interim next year to dig into this a little deeper and come up with a solid plan if that's the direction that we go in.
Representative Tipton and Senator West, I know you both spoke at CKEC yesterday. We really appreciated that. And we talked a little bit about some of this. And just to add on to my colleagues here, I think it's really easy to look at post-COVID as just a catch-all. And what I think we've seen is that this year is extremely unique as the years we had to deal with COVID. And when you have a unique year, you have to look at it with extraordinary examination. And we've had some unanticipated variables this year. First and foremost, I think our attendance percentages. And as I shared yesterday with you all, we've got 5 different illnesses going around in our districts right now. We have kids who go out for a week, come back, spend a day, go out for another week, come back and spend a day. And these are our students who want to be there. These are not normally our students who we deal with habitual truancy. So when we look at that, I would ask for some kind of temporary means. And I appreciate, with the short session, not being able to go into the large scale revisions to a lot of the formulas. But if we could get some assistance this year with the understanding that it's a very extraordinary year with things that we really hadn't anticipated. I don't know, some of the ideas we've thrown around, are using current ADM with a 1819 ADA and using that combination. We talked yesterday about making sure that any excess seek in the budget gets redistributed to districts instead of being swept back into the general fund. Any of those things would be, exceptionally helpful to us as we deal with some of these extraordinary variables that have hit us this year.
Other questions now from our group of superintendents and administrators?
Nobody else wants to talk. I'll talk this morning. The SRO topic. Yes, it's good, but only if you can find one. I started out the school year with 0. 7 schools, 0 SROs. Finally, I've been able my local city police and my sheriff's department, they finally got back to full capacity. So I'm getting ready to have one. Just started this week. Would I like to have more? Absolutely. But it also comes down to the capacity of our local police agencies and being able to provide us with appropriate staff. It takes a special person. I would go to Montgomery County right now and kidnap SRO Barrier and his daughter, by the way, and bring them to Lewis County if I could. But unfortunately, he's a rare person. We all need a Chris Barrier in our school districts. And I'm sure there are others, but we don't have that. So I would say if you're going to place funding, and I'm hopeful that you do, don't just limit that funding. Say, yes, it can be used on an SRO, but if it's coming to my school district, if I can't find one, let me use that money to continue to improve the other aspects of safety and security that are out there. We've made great gains. All of us have, I think, in the last few years. But there's always other things. There's always new innovations that we can find and see and add, but we have to be able to afford it. So if we can't get that SRO, then I would ask that the money not be hamstrung specifically to that. I promise you, all of us are going to try to find an SRO that's quality and put them in place. But if we don't have that, don't shortchange us just because Lewis County doesn't have the staffing. Let us take the money and continue to improve the other parts of school safety because we all know they're there. So I would just ask for that caveat to that if that is something that's funded. Some of you other guys are going to have to talk unless you want me to talk all morning.
I'd love to jump in here.
Oh, go right ahead. We Representative Wilner.
Thank you. Representative Wilner from Louisville, and I never pass up an invitation to speak with school leaders about public education. It's where my heart is for sure. And I thank all of you for the work that you do for our students each and every day. So in terms of the School Safety and Resiliency Act, there are several pieces to that. There's the hardening of the facilities, there's the SROs, and Senator Wise and I have had a great deal of discussion about my favorite piece of that bill, which is the trauma-informed schools piece. And I feel like Kentucky, we didn't know the pandemic was coming, obviously, but everything that's being recommended about school mental health, we already have in place through that trauma-informed schools piece of that law. And we know that the key to school safety, the research really bears out, is every child in the building having a relationship with a trusted adult in the building, whether it's the principal, whether it's a cafeteria worker, whether it's a custodian, a bus driver, whoever it is, often the teacher, of course. And so the trauma-informed schools piece was designed really to build that up. And as our students are experiencing more and more trauma, so is our staff. Then there's the secondary trauma of staff dealing with students who are facing so much need, so much trauma in their home lives, everything that our kids have been through with social isolation and all of that. I'm a licensed psychologist. We know that there are not enough mental health professionals in the state to provide the one-on-one services that our kids need. And that's in our cities, that's in our rural areas, that's in every part of our state. And so the trauma-informed schools idea was that we treat not individual kids, but we treat schools. We treat schools as the patients. How do we have schools that are more resilient? How do we have schools that are more nurturing, that are more supportive, where people recognize the signs of trauma in one another and see that? And so instead of blame and guilt, that there's support and care. And all of these words are easy to say. It's harder to implement, obviously. But I'm curious, and I would like to hear from all of you if the KDE toolkit that they've put out for trauma-informed schools, and it's not one size fits all. It's not you do this program and now you're trauma-informed. It's a whole attitude. It's a way of being in relationship with one another. So are those KDE resources helpful? Are the resources that we've provided as a legislature, are they enough? Lieutenant Governor Coleman and I have spoken a lot about school mental health and the needs of our students, and she led such a great effort to have students lead the conversation around this, and they're asking for these resources. So have we done enough to help you guys with the trauma-informed piece of this?
Oh, they've turned the question on you. Somebody have.
Yes.
Somebody want to respond to that? All right, your points are made.
Thank you.
So here, and this can almost be a yes/no question. We do this one quickly and then maybe return if something, another question hits your mind out there. But another comment made at the Kentucky Chamber legislative preview this week was one leader proposed, and maybe in a half joking way, that they would like to see the local school boards become partisan offices. They've always been nonpartisan in Kentucky. Of course, we've seen the lines blur in judicial races as well. The Kentucky Supreme Court has ruled that the common school system should be free of political influence. Would you support making school boards partisan offices?
Bill, let me take that first. The elections are over, and now it's time to get back to the business of governing. I think when you look at how people voted this last Tuesday, what they said to all of us loud and clear is they want us to work together. They want us to come and find consensus, pursue common sense governing policies, and just cut out all the noise and anger and divisiveness that they've seen over the last 6 years. I think that was the vote across this country. I think that was the vote in Kentucky. And I think we need to hear that we all need to work together. We need to unify and find common ground and move this state forward. We're about, progressing, as a state, and not about what's best for our political party. I think that was the decision the electorate made last Tuesday, and we need to hear that. Your judiciary, they made it clear that they don't want partisan politics in judiciary. Okay, and they sent that signal loud and clear. Any move to make school boards partisan, I think is ignoring what the people said when they went to the voting booth last week.
Emphatically, no. The courts and school education do not need partisan politics. I've always said that. I believe that if it was up to me, I'd make more offices nonpartisan, because we've got to get back to looking at the candidates and what they're doing, specifically that person, that individual, regardless of party, because we got two major parties. And there's about 3 parties in each party. So no. Great point.
That's not been an issue that the Education Committee has dealt with in the interim. That may go through state and local government, but in terms of our priorities with education, that's not been an issue that we've dealt with the interim. And with that, we struggle right now, you all do, of getting people to be site-based decision-making council members you have a hard time in your communities getting people to run even for office. And so I'm not for sure if that's the answer. I'm not going to, throw water on that legislator that brought that up, that we would not deal with that issue, but it's not been discussed in my committee during the interim.
Senator West, you made some notes.
Yes, I did. Can you hear me? Bill, I thought that was a yes or no question.
It was posed as such, but I'm among lawmakers and superintendents. So
I've never heard a lawmaker reply yes or no to a yes or no question. So I won't, I'll be the same. So, to be honest with you, this is the first time I've heard about that, question. I hadn't really put a lot of thought into it. We have a 30-day session coming up, and to me, to even delve into that issue would be a complete and total distraction. We only have a limited amount of time, and I've got a list here. We've got several very important issues to address, and I don't believe that would rise to the top. Yeah.
Representative Tipton.
We got bigger fish to fry this session.
Representative Luckett.
I probably can't say it better than what's been said already.
Representative Wilner.
I've served on a school board. I had no idea what my colleagues, how they were registered. I think it would be an enormous distraction.
Other questions from out there? Right here.
Yeah, I'll go. I'd also want to echo my appreciation for you guys sharing some of your thoughts and being here with us. It means a whole lot to us. I want to talk just briefly about recruiting and retention of teachers, and we could probably extend this conversation on to just anyone in the education profession, bus drivers, food service, and so on. But in Jessamine County, I shared a little bit of information yesterday. We've kept data for 15 years, and we do exit interviews with our teachers to find out why they are leaving Jessamine County. Over the past 15 years, the highest number we've ever had of teachers that have just left the profession completely before retirement and such. We've only had 3 of those in a given year. And this past year, we've had 15 that have just stepped away from the profession completely. Some of those with lots of years of experience. In the exit interviews, it seems like it does tie back to a lot of the emotional stress that they're going through and just a sense of not feeling appreciated. So anything that we can do to support that piece of it, I think is greatly appreciated. And while, some people may look at 15 teachers as maybe not a large number, those are lots of years of experience that Jessamine County lost, and a lot of those we replaced with 1 year's worth of experience. So we've got a lot of lost experience from those 15 leaving. And then also want to say this: there's a lot of hidden challenges that every school district is facing. We have some classes at the high school that we just don't offer any longer because we can't find somebody to fill that position. It's not on our job register as a posted position because we just haven't had luck over the past few years finding those. We have larger classes at some of our elementaries and some of our high schools, again, because we couldn't find teachers suitable to go into those classes. So it's a real challenge and something that I would love to hear some of your thoughts on, because it is something that we're struggling with on a daily basis.
Thanks, Matt. Matt was my superintendent, so I'm going to behave up here. But thank you for that. And I think that's really important because there's a lot of the things we've talked about today require funding of some sort, resources of some sort. Showing respect to the profession that creates all other professions doesn't cost anything. And we have been in a downward spiral for years now about how teachers are treated in the public, how they are talked about. A lot of our culture wars and partisanship have found its way into our kids' classrooms, and that doesn't help anything. I mean, you just heard everybody up here say it would be a terrible idea for board members to be, I don't want to speak for everybody, but it sounds like what you said is it's not a good idea to make school board members partisan, right? And yet so many of our culture wars are being fought in our classrooms right now. And the additional stress that is put on teachers when something outside of their domain is brought in and they're expected to deal with it is difficult. All of the challenges that we've talked about, transportation and mental health and school safety, attendance even, these are all issues that have always existed, but they've never been solely the responsibility of the school system until recently, right? And so that stress that again continues to add up. And so while we are so quick in education to, say we've got this issue, we need a solution, we need to figure this out, this is a problem. We need to have those conversations. I mean, that we've got to make environments better, learning environments better for our kids. But we've also got to really make sure that we take time to lift up those teachers, those cafeteria workers, those bus drivers that are exhausted, that are carrying the weight of your community, quite frankly. And that's not hard to do. It's not hard to say thank you. It's not hard to be positive on social media. I mean, for God's sakes, the keyboard warriors kill us all, right? It's just not so hard to be nice to people. And so while we've got to continue to work on providing these resources that are needed to do these jobs, we've also got to lift up the people that are doing this work every day. Yeah, we fall short every single day, but we're one step ahead today of where we were yesterday. And that's the progress that we need to celebrate with our educators and with our school systems.
Appreciate the comments. And, we can't legislate comments and attitudes, especially those on social media. And we see those as well, all of us up here. It doesn't matter if you're in your profession or ours, but what can we do legislatively?
Or the media. Go ahead.
Thanks, Bill. But what can we do this session legislatively? Well, let's look at maybe teacher observation hours, for someone who's doing student teaching. Is that a hindrance right now to people going into student teaching in the education field? Is that way too many hours to obtain for observation hours? Should we be looking at student teachers, for substitute teachers, reducing the amount of college credit hours? I think is it 65 hours or 65 credit hours? What if we take that down to 15? Would that help with substitutes? We looked at option 9 last year. I think Representative Walker Thomas had that bill. Now, some people could also say, well, Senator, you're getting into some areas there of truly people going into the profession that have had the appropriate training. I'm open. We have to start thinking creatively and outside the box. Is it the praxis? Should we be reducing the barriers for the praxis? I think that's an area right there. I've written down a few things here that maybe we need to look to do, because Mr. Moore is exactly correct. Recruitment and retention, that was the number one issue that we focused on this interim in the education committee meeting. We are hearing this across the board. Representative Tipton and others that have been at conferences, every state is dealing with this. Every state wishes they had the magic wand to say, how do we fix it? But there are so many ways that we have to be looking to get this right, because none of us will be in this position we're all in right now if it wasn't for a good teacher motivating us and making us believe in ourselves. So that's going to be the focus. I hope this session that we could come up with some things and some ways to improve this going forward.
I can't be quiet. And for those of y'all who listen to my floor speeches all these years, these guys have had to, but there's been well-funded national agendas against public education. We are seeing the effects, the well thought out, predicted effects of that, especially in our teachers. When you dismantle their pension system, when you demonize public education, when you defund them all across the board and don't address the needs, and we mean well up here, but it's bigger than us a lot of times, and we are now there are people who don't want qualified teachers in the classroom. They want to be taught what they want to be taught, and they're putting a lot of money in it. The dismantle the public education system. You got to be aware of that. You've got to fight back with that. And we've got, as policymakers, have to be in tune to what's going on, because it's not made up. It's real. So we're seeing the effects of that. And some people are sitting back laughing about it. But we're dealing with the consequences of preparing our next generation.
Bill? Chime in here a little bit, kind of piggyback on what Senator Wise had spoke about. He covered a lot of ground there, but this problem goes back to what Dr. Thompson was kind of talking about earlier. This is a unique issue in the history of the state. we have these shortages, but there's 15 different reasons for these shortages. And we can't address the problem with one solution. It's got to be 10 or 15 different small solutions. Okay. And so the number one thing is to keep this in perspective. We don't have just a teacher shortage. We have a people shortage. Have you been to McDonald's lately? We need teachers. We need engineers. We need surveyors. We need all different types. We need construction workers. So we've got to somehow, as a government, make it easier for people to get from point A to point B. One of the ideas I've had, and I thought this is just an idea. Maybe we could do some teacher scholarships for teachers in high poverty counties. So kind of like we do with doctors, if we want to promote people going into certain places, let's say Eastern Kentucky is being depopulated and it's not necessarily a great place to go at this time. Maybe we can incentivize some of these teachers. You know, you get this scholarship, you got to serve there 5 years in one of these counties. And I think what you'll find is, okay, they settle down, have a couple kids, they get invested in the community, boom, all of a sudden you're building something. So that's one idea. We've talked a lot, Representative Tipton and I spoke with CPE recently. There's a teacher apprenticeship program that we're working on. And as Senator Wise stated, let's make it easier for teachers to go from college graduation to the classroom. It seems like some teachers are getting tripped up right in that space where they may graduate with a 4-year degree and never teach. So we got to make it easier. And to Dr. Thompson's comments, these are going to take unique solutions. This is a unique time in history. No one could have ever expected a worldwide pandemic, record inflation, and all the things all you guys are dealing with.
Bill, I'd like to just Jeff Saylor, of course, from Estill County, just talking about teacher shortages. 38 years ago, when I began my career, I was a biology and math person coming out of college, and I had a very difficult time finding a job. That was 38 years ago. So this started a long time ago in terms of the teacher shortage and how over the years, even to the point to where just a few years ago, we went a year without a certified physical education teacher, which would have been unheard of. So I think there's a lot of factors playing into that. But again, I do think it comes down to the point are we going to put a value on public school teachers and education? You know, that's one of the ideals is that we are trying to present that education would become one of the high demand, high work, high wage sectors in terms of just like when we were building our area technology center, that was bipartisan, by the way, for the support for that project. And I said at the opening of that facility, it just goes to show that when everybody comes together, Republicans and Democrats, you do a great thing in funding that facility. We now have a brand new facility that has over 400 students in it in Estill and Powell County. So I think it's something that we have to come together on. And I think if we could make teaching a high wage, high demand sector and put that emphasis on it, because we have students that are going to college and they're $100,000 to get a degree and they're coming out and they're getting a $40,000 job.
Right.
That's difficult when you're 44th in the nation in terms of teacher pay. And not only that, leading up to that, all of the hours that Senator Wise talks about that they have to do in terms of their observation hours and all that, you know, an ideal is like paid apprenticeships that they're compensated for that time that they spend. So I know that all goes back to money, it all goes back to budget, but I just think that if we will raise the public perception of what public educators and what teachers and school workers are, I think we'll go a long way towards addressing the teacher shortage.
Thank you, Bill. referring back to Lieutenant Governor Coleman and when she opened and spoke about the historic economic investments in Kentucky, I think this kind of all ties together. And I think it's an opportunity for us to all roll up our sleeves and work together. That's wonderful. And kudos to that accomplishment to recruit those companies into Kentucky. But it does create a problem of practice. And we know that Chamber of Commerce knows that, our partners know that, you all know that. And that is workforce development. Well, that workforce development starts in our schools. That's the foundation for it. We have to do the ABCs, 1, 2, 3s of teaching and learning foundationally first, and then get our students ready to be life ready in whatever career pathway they choose. For our district, Harrison County, about 75% of our students choose not to go on to a traditional 4-year university degree program. They are looking for something else. They don't want to take on $100,000 in debt for a degree program, but they are looking for a career pathway with upward mobility, lifelong learning, micro-credentialing, partnered with the employer that they work for. They're looking for a path to better themselves throughout life, which we all know we have to do. But to develop a workforce, we've got to have 2 or 3 things. One, we've got to have the proper training programs. We know that. I think there's some amazing training programs, educational programs across the state in locally identified centers and in ATCs. We've got to have the personnel, the educators to teach those students. And that's a problem, but we can solve that. We can train those folks now as our education leaders while we're training for other careers. We can do educators rising and train teachers, and we can work together on that. Kudos to spoke with the Representative Tipton yesterday about the work ready scholarships and the availability for those, the flexibility now in those, and maybe looking at increasing flexibility with work ready scholarships. But the third piece to that is we've got to have equitable and adequate learning spaces that are aligned with the programs that we're trying to train the careers for. So we can't teach people how to be support in a battery state-of-the-art, 21st century battery investment facility if we're not teaching what we need to teach in that area, or support Toyota. And they're late. I mean, I visited their robotic engineering center, and you talk about amazing with what they're doing over there with their engineering and how they're looking to the future. We are one of the largest suppliers of employees of the workforce to that region where we sit, to Toyota and CMWA and 3M and other folks. But let me just give you an example. Our high school has an educational suitability rating of 29%. That's adequacy. That's for the students we're teaching and the programs we're teaching. It has a 29% educational suitability rating. And our middle school has a 17% suitability rating. I've got 4 elementary schools, and there's $35 million in unmet need in those facilities. Now, we've got a master plan. Our community came together, supported a master plan to redesign that community and meet all of those needs at the same time. But because of the inflation and because of the other issues that are happening, we're 30% inflationary cost on construction. Everybody here knows it. Everybody here is trying to do the same things. It's just not there now. But if we don't strike now to invest in that, we can't meet those workforce needs for these companies that are investing in our state. So I think we have to really think about making a leap forward and stepping forward now while we can. I'm interested in hearing what your thoughts are on that. House Bill 678, I think, was a really good piece of legislation that you all passed. It gave some flexibility for districts to move forward in some ways that we were somewhat limited and hamstrung for. So your thoughts on what you're looking forward in the future with that type of policy, type governance, and just the partnerships. Mental health and wellness, huge. We partner with 3 outside agencies, and we have 3 internal school psychologists plus counselors and social workers. But it's challenging. It's workforce. So all those areas, we really appreciate your all support and investment. We know that we do this together. It's not partisan, like you said, Representative Thomas, Senator Webb. We roll up our sleeves, and we can do this together as Kentuckians. So thank you for your time.
Any response?
Amen.
Easy enough. Anybody else?
To piggyback on what Dr. Bartlett has said here, 4 years ago, Woodford County had a BG1 to build a new high school at $39 million. We just approved the latest BG1 at $76 million. Nothing has changed on the project other than COVID. That's the only thing that has changed. So we're seeing, and if we don't do it now, 6 months from now, it could be $82 million. So it's either do it now or possibly never get it done. So the district has decided that we're making an investment from within the district out of general fund to make this happen. But to touch on those things, especially our social emotional needs, I don't think there's ever going to be okay, here's the fix. We're going to have to continually adjust this, monitor this, because now we're seeing things that we never thought we'd ever see. We're dealing with some things that elementary schools have never seen in Woodford County before. And I think it's all pandemic related, certainly. And they were only virtual throughout the time when the governor had mandated it to be virtual. They went to school almost 140 days the first year of the pandemic. So we're still seeing that, but I don't think we're going to be able to have a one size fits all for our social emotional needs. We're going to have to adjust those, I think, yearly as to address the needs that we're seeing. But just the two things I want to throw out there is the crazy inflation of what's happened with our construction, and then the social emotional needs are we're trying to find folks to partner with right now. So again, I just want to throw that out there. Responses?
I want to add one thing to the construction thought. So many districts have tried to get the nickel tax and are unable to. Okay, we're going to try it again pretty soon. The maximum bonding potential for Lawrence County school system right now is $17 million. A 4th-grade elementary school is going to cost me $27 million. It's going to cost our taxpayers, going to cost our people $27 million. Without 2 nickels, not one, without 2 additional nickels, we can't afford a new building. So all the thought too, I understand that legislators really strongly feel that local districts need to have skin in the game. But when you have a school system that has paid their financial liabilities and paid off their bonds, and their maximum potential bonding is 17 million, you can't build a new school for that. Not in this day and time. 4 years ago, we could have built a 4th-grade elementary for 17 million. Been pretty nice. Now, from our architect, we're estimated at 27 million. So something else I'd like for you to consider, and I would like to echo, I think Dr. Burchett and Mr. Atkins did a wonderful job talking about construction. House Bill 678 was great. Thank you. Also, administration, Lieutenant Coleman and Lieutenant Governor Coleman and Governor Bashir, thank you for vocational money. But we have a $9.28 million project, very similar, started off 4 years ago, and I don't even have close enough money to do that project either. So one thing to keep in mind is the nickel tax. And we're going to fight that battle one more time, just like Bath County, Lee County. Jim, you did it 4 times, failed all 4 times, correct? Failed 4 times. Thank you. Good point.
Let me ask a follow-up to that. And when you say need help with it, you're saying that it is difficult for you to pass it and then it may be recalled. And so what do you want the legislature to do?
Well, let me add, as far as when you talk about the failed process, your Board of Education can take the bold move of passing a nickel tax. For 45 days, the local community members can put together a petition. They put down a petition. They have 45 days to get 10% of the last presidential election signatures on it. If that passes, then it goes to ballot. Then, if I'm correct, Dr. Evans, you went to ballot 4 times? 4 times, lost all 4 times. If you look at the facilities in Lee County, some of the highest need facilities in the state. Bath County, you're very similar. Lawrence County, we're in the same type of situation. Now, what I would ask for legislators is to consider allowing districts to add nickel taxes without it being recallable.
Recently failed in Fayette County. They couldn't get enough signatures to have an election. So
they move forward.
Do you think there's an urban-rural divide on that?
In Bath County, 567.
Gotcha.
Fayette County,
Yeah.
Yes. So again, with that nickel tax, and the matching funds, because, I've talked to several of you, and I've talked to Governor, I've talked to Rocky Atkins. There's not a lot of help if you don't have the nickel tax. You don't get that matching funds unless you get the nickel tax. So again, a lot of districts that have tried and tried and tried are unable to get that nickel tax, are unable to get the matching funds also. So again, 17 million is our maximum bonding potential right now. That will not build a school.
Representative Tipton wanted to weigh in.
Thank you, Bill. And I certainly understand the issue you're facing. We talked about this actually, and Senator West had this as a topic on our last budget review subcommittee on education. Dr. Burchett was there. We understand these issues. Another part of this is in areas of the state that are losing population, assessment values are going down, where there's economic depression, where they're losing jobs. So that compounds that as well. I don't know what the answer is right now, but we certainly hear you. I'm going to apologize for Representative Lockett and myself. We have a meeting in Frankfurt at 12, and we have to be there. I'm going to make one comment there. If I count it right, and I may have missed one or two, but there are 22 new members coming into the House of Representatives in January. I know the Senate's got several new members. If you've got a new member in your district and you haven't talked to them, reach out. I'm speaking for myself, who came in new a few years ago. You don't know what you don't know. It's a learning process. Open up the doors of communication. These new individuals coming in, maybe they've got some preconceived ideas. That's their right to have those ideas, but keep the dialogue open and have that conversation. And I do apologize, but we've got to head out. Thank you all.
Well, we do want to respect everybody's time, and I think we're about to that point. Let me, and safe travels to Frankfurt. Thank you for being here. Let me make a real quick political observation, which is what I do. And then I'll turn it over to Nancy Hutchinson for closing remarks. But interestingly and hearteningly here today, what I've heard from the superintendents and these a group of bipartisan lawmakers is bipartisanship and nonpartisanship on education issues. I think that's very heartening. And I will give the political crowd a little incentive on that, because by the end of this year, it appears that 10% of Kentucky voters will be registered independent. They're not going to either party. And the young people, age 18 to 30, a plurality of those in the recent filings registered independent, something like 40%. So that's where they're going. That's where and I've been around long enough that I remember when there were 7 Republicans in the Senate. And I remember when there were, the Democrats controlled the House. So things change, tides change, and the inner elements of politics change. And this is what we may be seeing, in the next few years. An awful lot of independent voters who have no allegiance to any political affiliation will be making the decisions about who serves. Just an interesting thought. Nancy Hutchinson is going to come up. There, she's here, right? I called her my old Starbucks friend. When I was doing morning news, we'd run into each other about every morning.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Bill. That was awesome. And we appreciate you coming and giving your time, because you've changed your times. And that's right. We're used to seeing you in the morning, and now we miss him. But he's on in the evening. So we appreciate that. Also, I'd like to say a special thank you for our panel. I know you all are very, very busy, and to have made this commitment to these superintendents is heartfelt. And it's just, it means a whole lot to us. So we want you to know that Lieutenant Governor, a very educational Lieutenant Governor and Governor, and we appreciate that. You all are welcome at KEDC anytime you'd like to come and just sit in the audience or sit with us and talk. We will have you at any time. We meet about 8 times a year. So we'd love to have you. Any other comments, questions, anything we need to take care of? I'd like to say thank you to Dr. Jim Flynn, Kentucky Association for School Superintendents. There's no one around that's got his ear any closer to the ground for superintendents than Jim. And he's so in tune and knows every new legislator that comes around and reaches out and has good conversations with them on your behalf. Also, Eric Kennedy from Kentucky School Board Association. We lean on him a lot. I'm sure he feels it most times, but he's also in Frankfurt a whole lot, and we appreciate him and his advocacy for public public schools and public school board members. So we'd like to thank each person that did come out today, and safe travels and happy holidays. Thank you. It is.